Hello. Hey guys, this is Karina and I from For the World, and today we'll be talking about driving and like distracted driving and substance abuse while driving and how that can really impact traffic incidents on the road.
Yeah, what Sia said, we're trying to target this towards like adolescents or maybe people who are new to driving, just so they know like what to get used to on the road and how they can avoid accidents and everything like that.
So the top cause of traffic incidents is distracted driving, and I think that's the one that's the most relevant to all drivers, since some drivers may also be under the age of using substances. Distracted driving has become really important, especially in this like current world where everyone is always on their phones and always looking at text or social media all the time.
Yeah, that's so true. I think like phones are a huge distractor. Like whenever I'm driving, I always like think to myself, Karina, stay off your phone. Or like even if I'm at a stoplight, I have like a huge temptation. Like I'm stopped. Like I can pick up my phone, right? But I keep having to tell myself, like, don't pick it up. It's just gonna distract you or something. So like technology and phones are a huge distraction. And honestly, like even just like playing with the radio, sometimes that's kind of distracting as well, but I don't know. I try to avoid everything just because, especially because I'm young too. I don't want to get in any accidents.
Yeah, I think like for me, I'm a new driver, just got my permit a couple months ago, and it's like for me, I really like enjoying the music, listening to music when I'm in the car, but right now it's like I really have to focus on learning how to drive properly first, and it's really hard to resist that temptation. Or like sometimes my phone will buzz next to me, and I'll like get scared
Yeah.
while driving, even if I'm not checking it. So I think it's always important to like keep that distraction away as far away from me as possible. Otherwise, that can be a bit of an issue.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, I don't know, like you said about having to focus a lot, for me, especially if I'm driving on like new roads or something, I have to really stay focused. Like if I'm in like a mall that's like super busy, there's a lot of pedestrians, or if I'm just on like a really like in the city, like a complex road, I'm always really nervous. So I have like hyper like attention on, like I'm so focused. But usually like if I'm driving like in my neighborhood, it's usually more relaxing. So I guess that's where I'm more tempted to like pick up my phone or something. But yeah, it's just all about focus.
Honestly, I think it's like really hard, especially like new roads and stuff like that. And because you're using a GPS as well.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes your phone does that like do not disturb on driving mode, but sometimes like it doesn't. And like whenever you see those notifications, or like if you have other passengers in the car and they're on their phones, it's like it makes you really tempted to like check that text that you might have sent before you started driving. That's like, oh my gosh, should I get a response yet or not?
Yeah. And I think like it's not even just phones for distracted driving. Sometimes if I'm on the road and like the passenger beside me or something would be like, "Oh wow, look at the horse farm." I'm like, "Horse farm? Like I want to look." But then I'm like taking a corner or something like, "Oh, can't look right now." So it's like also just things that are like around the road that may like distract you.
I think it's really important to always make sure that you're paying attention to the road. And like even if sometimes the distractions can be on the road itself, like you might see something like on the side where it's like, oh, like maybe like a broken like tire or something, or like remnants from a car accident. But you just always have to make sure that like I get it's natural to look and we all do it. But when you do look, you just have to make sure to get your attention back really quickly. Because I'm not going to sit here and act like none of us will ever look to the side whenever we're driving, because it's bound to happen. But I think it's always important to just recognize when you're doing that and making sure that you take the steps to make sure that you're safe if you do end up looking.
Yeah, safety is very important. I know like whenever like when I was taking driver's ed, like they always said like to know what's around you, like always be aware. Is there a car in front of you? Is there a car beside you? And I think that's really important. Like you said, like if you want to look at something, first make sure like you're safe around you and then you can like look like, oh, there's something on the side of the road or something.
I think like a, it's just yeah, as you said, it's important to make sure that you're staying safe. And I think like another big distractor is the passengers in the car and like the conversations, like especially if you have friends and sometimes even family, like they'll either be talking to you or they'll be having their own conversation and it's really loud and that just makes it hard to focus because like I know for me, especially when I'm like studying and doing things like that, I know that I'm typically the person who like needs a quiet environment. I don't really play much music and stuff when I study. And I think with driving, even though it is more like a relaxed environment and you're not trying to really retain any of the information, you still do have a big responsibility. And at the end of the day, you're responsible for the lives of the passengers in that car. And I think a lot of people overlook that when they're driving, and that's where they start to become distracted really easily.
Yeah, I think your point that like you're responsible for like all the lives around you, that's like super meaningful, especially like when you're driving, you don't really think about it because like you're in the car can protect you, but like the other people around you aren't protected, and sometimes even the people inside of the car, like if you crash, then I'm not gonna say it's like 100% your fault. Like it's of course it's gonna be like people around you might be the problem as well, but it's like a huge responsibility to drive.
And I think, like, as you said, it's not 100% your responsibility if something bad does happen. But even if it's not, I feel like a lot of people make it seem like it is. So, like, regardless of like the situation, I think you're going to have this big responsibility, especially if or when things go wrong, because of the fact that you were in charge of the car itself. And I think that it not necessarily should be that way, but I mean that's how it is. And I think with that, you just have to make sure that you're keeping up with that responsibility. And I understand, like, at the end of the day, things happen and not every single drive will be super smooth. But I think it's always just important to make sure that you remember that responsibility and do what you can about it, because there are some things out of our control, but I think some things definitely people could do better on, and they would remember better if they like kept up with that responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, like growing up, oh, there's more responsibilities. But I don't know. I feel like when you drive, like every time I got in the car and started driving, I always learned something new. Like, oh, like instead of turning like this, I need to turn like a little tighter, turn the wheel a little more. So I feel like if you start off bad and you're like, oh my God, I'm the worst driver ever, like it'll get better. Like you'll keep learning new things. And if you're not quite sure like how the traffic will work, like don't be afraid to like ask your parents or something, or even like your teacher at the driver's ed school. But yeah, it will be like a big responsibility, but like every time you'll learn something more and you'll be more comfortable driving.
I think a big thing is that, like, if the distractors are in your car, it's important to make sure you're talking to them directly. And sometimes it's like, oh yeah, like I want to see who are my friends, and it's like I know how to drive, like I'll be fine. But then you catch yourself like listening to those conversations. Just let them know. I feel like at the end of the day, like yeah, they'll be like, oh my, like the most they're gonna say is like, oh my god, like that's so silly that like you're asking us to stop. But they will stop because at the end of the day, they understand that most of them will probably also be drivers, and they'll get the fact that like you have to make sure that you're keeping everyone safe. And I think at the end of the day, everyone cares about safety and can compromise a little bit of fun if it impacts the lives of so many.
Yeah, definitely choose safety over something that may be like more fun. But I think it's definitely your friends will like definitely stop, or like whoever's distracting will stop if you tell them. But if you don't, then it's okay to say like, oh, I don't really want to drive you guys around anymore, or something like that. But like they should stop. Like if you just let them know how you feel, like always choose safety over anything, like Sia was saying. Something else, like other than distracted driving, like sometimes that may like cause a lot of accidents is like aggressive driving, which I was looking at this, and sometimes I feel like there's always somebody like who's mad and they're on the road. Like if I'm just driving, minding my own business, there's always gonna be somebody who's like tailgating me. I'm like you don't always have to be mad on the road. I feel like that's like a huge danger to like safety and stuff.
I think like some people they do it like jokingly too, but at the end of the day, like to the other driver, they don't know what your intentions are, and they may feel a bit intimidated by that. And it's just like a never ending cycle at that point, because then one person gets mad, the next one gets mad, and then the other person, it's just like it keeps going. And I think it's just important to make sure that you keep your cool on the road, because you really don't want to be a part of an unsafe driving environment wherever you go.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem with aggressive driving. Like it's just like a domino effect on everyone. But I think like to keep your cool, I think just think of like the consequences. Like if you're getting mad, just like think about like if you got actually got really mad, like what could happen? Think about the consequences. Like would that really like help me? Like okay, just cool down and everything will be fine. I think.
And if it's really something that's like on your mind that has nothing to do with the road, I think it's always okay to just like pull off the road and just take a break. I know we're usually always in a rush to go somewhere, but I think it's better to just take a quick break, like for 5 minutes or something, and just like let yourself calm down. And I think that way, like the driving experience will also be more pleasant for you, and it'll feel less of a burden, and it'll also just make sure that everyone around you and yourself are safe. So at the end of the day, I think it is more of a win-win if you do take that time to just calm yourself down.
Taking breaks are really important. Like, if driving ever feels like a burden, then maybe like start to think of what you could be doing differently or what like other people could be doing differently. But you're right, taking breaks, that's a really nice way to like just calm down and maybe like stop at a gas station or get something to eat just to like stay safe. Always about safety. Oh, something that's also really hazardous is like driving I mean, driving at night, but also driving during the winter when there's like when it's really snowy and icy outside. Yeah, I
I
think
think that's like definitely really big, especially around like Chicagoland area and stuff
yeah.
like that. I think it's like a really big thing. And I personally have never driven in the winter, but I do know, like, from what I've been told and how risky it can be,
Yeah.
especially things like black ice, which you never see. You
Yes.
always have to make sure that you're going at the proper speed, going under the speed limit if possible, and if it's safe, because it will save you so much, especially during the winter, because a lot of people think like, oh, it'll do nothing to me. But the amount of people that I know that have gotten into major and or minor
Mhm.
accidents during the winter, it's honestly insane.
Yeah. I have never driven in the winter either, but I've seen my parents drive. And when it's kind of early snow and like the snowmobiles or like the trucks that plow the snow, like they haven't been out yet, then there's like just like inches of snow piling up and your car has to drive through that. Like that just seems really hazardous and not very safe, but if you have to go somewhere, then just drive slowly. Always drive slowly when it's super icy out.
Yeah, and I think like especially in like local areas and stuff like that, it's especially important. Even like let's say there's like stoplights and stuff like that, and you're driving really fast, and let's say the stoplight turns red and you just have to stop, like it becomes almost impossible to do that. And I feel like it's just those smaller things that like you just do all the time whenever you drive, but you don't realize how much extra caution you have to
Yeah.
take in these like extreme weather conditions. I think it's always important to not really make driving like a monotone robotic task, and it's something that you're actively thinking about when you're doing it, because I feel like when everyone kind of just puts it at the back of their mind like, okay, yeah, it's like second nature, like it's good that you're comfortable with it, but you always have to remember that every situation is different, and every time you're on the road, even if it is the same road, it's going to be a different driving experience, and you have to make sure that you're aware of your surroundings and aware of the conditions.
Yeah, I like that. Every situation is different. That's so true. Like every time I go on the road, like I'll always see like a different car. If I'm like trying to like merge with traffic, like something always happens. And it's just like having to like think in the moment. If something goes wrong, it's about like relaxing your mind and thinking in the moment and just trying to get through whatever went wrong. And I know sometimes it's kind of difficult, but I guess again, like with practice with time, you'll get used to it.
Yeah. I think there's like one more thing that's like really a big like cause of accidents on the road that's also pretty relevant to like all age groups, which is drowsy driving.
Mhm.
That's a pretty big one. Like going to school in the morning, you're
Yeah.
half awake, you jump out of bed, and it's like, okay, now it's time for me to
Yes.
drive. I'm ready on the road. Or like if people are going to work too, coming home from work late at night.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of times when we're driving, it's to commute from places, and it's school or work for the majority of the time. And before and after, we're always
Mhm.
exhausted.
Yeah, and I don't think like just like drinking caffeine or something will help that. Like, oh, let me just take this cup of coffee before I go out. I'll be fine driving. I don't know. I don't know if that will help exactly. Because like your focus your focus still isn't there completely, right? Caffeine still impairs some of your focus when you're
Yeah,
tired.
I know, I think in driver's ed, they taught us to like not necessarily drink caffeine for like that boost of energy right before you do drive. It's just not really good, especially if you're going to be driving for a long time. It just gives you like a boost of energy, but
Yeah.
then it doesn't really sustain you throughout the rest of the day. So if you have caffeine in the morning, but you're exhausted and then you have to
Yeah.
drive back home at night, that caffeine from the morning is not going to do anything
Yeah,
to you. And in
no.
fact, you might even be more tired.
Yeah. I'd say if you're tired, I think one thing I heard somebody say once is when they're tired, they'll drive a short distance and they'll take a break and then drive another short distance. Like if you can't find anybody else to drive you, but you really have to go somewhere and you're super drowsy, then just like drive like 5 minutes, 10 minutes and find somewhere to park, take a break. Or maybe even just like take a little nap before you go off.
That honestly does sound like a pretty smart idea. And like a lot of the times I know like if you're driving at like these unusual hours out of your normal routine when you might be exceptionally tired, it's mostly to go to events and things like that. So carpooling is always a good option if you do have that. But as Karina said, if you don't always have these options, that's another good thing is just to take breaks while you're driving.
Yeah, carpooling is a good option because not only will somebody else be driving you, but you'll be like with somebody else. So if something goes wrong, like you'll always have somebody by you to help you.
I think it also just makes the experience more fun, quite honestly. It's just like you have someone to talk to, and like if you do need another driver, if they need a break, you guys can get through a longer distance in a shorter amount of time. And I think that gives like a little bit less responsibility on both drivers and allows them to be a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah. I was also thinking like I completely forgot but if you really can't drive, then maybe get an Uber or something. Like if you're so tired, so drowsy, then like don't be afraid to buy an Uber. But like if you don't want to spend the money, then I understand.
I think Ubers are a pretty good option, like for a lot of situations that people overlook. Like, yeah, it might be 10, $15, but just think about it in like this, like it's 10, $15 right now, but what about if something does go
Yeah.
wrong? Then it would be maybe
Yeah,
a
that's a
couple
lot.
extra zeros added to the 10 of it.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So, and Uber is super accessible too. Just download the app. Is that is that all the aspects of car accidents? How to stay safe?
I think that's most of them. And then the last one is like substance abuse and things like that. And Karina and I both are not of age
Yeah.
to be using substance. But I think like overall the key takeaway from that, from like what I understand, is just that just stay away from all that if you're
Yeah.
driving. Like I mean, if you're legal, that's personal choice whether you choose to do it or not. But I think that it's important to make sure that if you do make that choice to use substances and stuff like that, if you're at a party or for whatever reason, just make sure you're keeping others safe around you. And most importantly, obviously, yourself. And by doing substances and being under the influence when driving, it's just very, very risky for you
Mhm.
and all the passengers, if there are any, and others on the road.
Yeah, and like Sia said, if you do choose to use substances, then always have like a backup plan, like a designated driver or someone who's responsible or who's available, like to pick you up if you really need something.
As we said, Ubers are always an option.
Yeah.
And I think with this one, like, especially if you do have a group, then it would be safer maybe sometimes to take that Uber if no one is capable enough of driving, if they're all under the influence.
Yeah. Ubers are super helpful. All right. Do you have a last statement to tell everyone out there of how to stay safe driving?
I think it's just make sure that you're prioritizing your safety and other safety on the road. And the best thing to do is just take breaks as needed and just know your limits. I think those are two big things. And always remember there's an Uber if you ever
Yeah.
do need anything.
Always remember. Yeah, that's perfect, Sia. Always stay safe. Know like what your car is capable of and know what you're capable of. And stay focused, stay safe.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was our podcast episode. Bye, guys.